Okay, we are live here at Global Live. Welcome, everybody. We have, I think, like the best panel ever on marketing and digital marketing. To have all these folks in one place is just absolutely amazing. In fact, all three have been individual guests of ours at Credible Live, but we get them all in one spot now. So amazing. We're going to be talking about digital marketing today, about the trends and what's changed in the cannabis and the digital world of brand marketing trends and more. So let's kick off here. And David, could you give us a quick and brief background and bio of yourself?
Sure. My name is David Palashuk. I'm a cannabis brand consultant. I focus on branding in particular and brand licensing. I help brands, cannabis brands, primarily expand and grow across state lines. I have 25 plus years in branding and marketing at American Express, MasterCard, Pepsi, and Microsoft, and now 14 years in the cannabis space. So that all adds up to mean I'm very old, but I'm around. I'm still alive and kicking.
Well, I don't know if you're that old. You're probably not that much older than me. But hey, we're just going to say experience. Going to use that term, old. So, Amy, how about you? You've been on our show as well, and give us a quick, brief intro.
I'm Amy. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. I have been doing social media since MySpace. I started out personal branding myself as a stand-up comic and radio DJ here. And then one of my followers wanted me to put her company on there. And I thought a company on social media was the dumbest thing ever. And here we are. So definitely eating my words as we evolve in this industry. I've been in cannabis since 2012, and I focus on compliance and professionalism, which piggybacks off of professional branding like David's.
Excellent. And Lori, come back as well. I know you're on lots of different podcasts, and you just spoke at recently at, I think it was the Benzinga conference. So reintroduce yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Lori Parfit. I am a fractional chief marketing officer in the cannabis space. I'm based in Chicago, Illinois. I have a company called LKP Impact Consulting. We help companies who don't need or can't afford full-time marketing support. We provided a size and scale for small to mid-sized businesses. I've been in the industry since 2019 when I started with a multi-state operator running 10 dispensaries across 6 states, and have now been managing my own practice since 2020. Excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, glad all three of you are here. We have a lot to talk about today. And first of all, I have to apologize if I freeze up a little bit. We're having some bandwidth issues in the studio today. So forgive me if I freeze up, but if you need me to repeat any questions, certainly let me know. So one of the key things is that the digital cannabis marketing, it's been really evolving tremendously, and it's a rapid response to a lot of shifting regulations and maturing customer expectations and ongoing restrictions from a lot of these digital, platforms. So can you share with us what's sort of changed and where's the industry heading as of where we stand right now in 2025?
What I think is interesting is that as much as things change, things also stay the same. And so digital marketing is definitely evolving, just like so many other things within the space. But at least from my perspective, we're still incredibly limited as to what we can do. And so, when we think about it from a social media perspective, when I joined the space back in 2019, everybody told me everybody's, Instagram page was getting shut down. Everybody's Facebook was getting shut down. And so we weren't able to sell product or promote product on Meta's platforms, but we utilized it to build community. And that is how, we approached it back then. And I think it's probably still the way we need to approach it now, because even though Meta has said that they are putting some programs in place so that cannabis can be utilized on social media, I personally have yet to see it. I still see a lot of cannabis companies' pages getting shut down. I still see all kinds of limitations in terms of the content that you can put out there. And so I think there's still a ton of work to be done here. And we are seeing some, progress on the hemp side, but I do believe that that is kind of them potentially, skirting some of the Instagram guidelines. So I think that there's still a lot that needs to be done, and we still need to evolve a lot as an industry and as a culture to make sure that we can utilize digital marketing more effectively.
And it seems
I
like,
think you. Oh,
go ahead,
Dave. Oh, okay. I was just going to say, this is like I'm really good with metaphors because I used to teach middle school Spanish, which nobody wants to take, but it's called social media, not sell my media. And Lori, you said the exact same thing. Like, this isn't for promoting. It's not to put your BOGOs. That's what your email and SMS is for. It's for building a community and showing the culture of your company. That's going to draw people in, not a grid of all your packaging, which is too salesy. We have sales funnels out there, but when it comes to social media and the front facing stuff for clients, it's about community building and telling people the story of the people behind your brand.
I think one of the things, I'll start off by saying your question, what has changed? For a moment, let's just ask, what hasn't changed? And what hasn't changed is that people want to feel part of something. People want to be part of a community. When they are in a consumer mindset and want to make a purchase, they want consistency. They want to know what they're getting, what's in it, et cetera, and the story behind it. And I think in so many ways, the basics are just lost in terms of what's the latest hack, or how do we get around, our secondary account because our primary account was just shut down. So I just want to start off, if you don't mind, by sort of throwing that out there and saying we are all human. We all still interconnect and want to connect in ways that we know. And then outside of that, we start to shut down, when we just get hit and bombarded with all the chatter out there. So, what is pulling me into a community isn't necessarily selling me something, or vice versa. And by the way, some of the best selling and brands I've seen in the cannabis space in particular are the ones that connect with people in their community in an organic setting. And let me just give you one quick example. I'll give you two quick examples. One is called fish whistle. Fish whistle is a slang word for what anglers call a pre-roll or a joint. So there's a company called Fish Whistle out of Vermont. And what do? They show up at all the angler events and all the, the fly fishing events. And, now they have a line of apparel that everybody purchases, and everybody's really proud of Fish Whistle because it's the inside joke. The inside joke is always about community, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So they show up at these events where their customers are showing up. And another one is called Heavy Grass, which is cannabis appealing to the heavy metal community. What's so, in a way, easy about that? They know who their customer is. They know what their style and lifestyle is. They know how to talk to them, and they know where, just by all the concert tour dates, where these people are showing up. Therefore, they're able to more easily integrate into the community, both in the real world and online. And that's where it comes back to, I hate these two words, authenticity and credibility, but that's truly what it's about. It's about that connection.
I agree with you, David.
I want to hear more about this community. What are brands doing? I mean, you talked about two of them, but what do you think about that?
So one of the things that I did when I first started was, I was like, okay, I can't sell products on social media. I can't promote anything really. So I'm going to build community. And how am I going to build community? And the thing about cannabis is that it's still a and back then it was really misunderstood, very misunderstood product and category. And so there's a lot of people who were brought up in, the Ronald Reagan war on drugs days, like myself, who don't have the familiarity with the product, why you would use it, when you would use it, how you would use it. So the way we approached it was we took a look at our own universe of people, so our own staff, and we went out and said, okay, we're gonna do a social media. I don't even want to call it a campaign, because it was really more about, how we were going to approach social media. And we want to hear from all of you. What brought you into cannabis? Tell us your cannabis story, what you love about working with the company, and just do it on your phone, like nothing fancy. Just send it to us. And the leadership team is going to spend some time going through it. We're going to select 5 or 6 people, and we're going to make you brand ambassadors for us, so to speak. And we're going to do a video and photo shoot and have you tell your story. And we got a tremendous response from our audience within our entire staff. And we got a bunch of videos, and it was a very difficult decision for the leadership team, but we selected 5 people across the company and had them come in and tell their stories. And I got to tell you, even for all of us, it was a really emotional day, because the things that people were talking to us about, like someone who had autoimmune, had Crohn's, and had been told they were going to have a colostomy bag for the rest of their life when they were in high school, and how they utilized cannabis and got sent to drug rehab. Like, all of those kinds of stories are really impactful, and they're very relatable. And the overall goal was, if someone could see her and say, okay, I have autoimmune, or I have Crohn's, or I have, rheumatoid arthritis, and look, she was able to mitigate some of her symptoms, and she was able to live a better life with cannabis, maybe I can too. And I can go to the dispensary where she works, and I can actually go talk to her. And so by at least putting people out there who told their true, authentic stories, we were hoping to make sure that people didn't feel so alone in the world. And after we started that, prior to us launching, we basically weren't on the map at all. Once we launched, we saw that our engagement was 7 times all of our competitors put together.
Wow.
Because people really wanted to hear those stories. People really wanted to feel like they could understand how, what, and why to use cannabis.
I mean, that's incredible. Yep. Now, is it when you talk about these things in these videos, it seems to be the way that you get the brand to stand out and create that, sorry, David, authenticity and that uniqueness, right? And that's really what you're talking about. But I've also noticed that many cannabis brands seem to be using the same platform, and how do they really truly stand out with that unique voice using strategies like that when we're in a very crowded space and it's getting more crowded every day?
I would say my favorite account on Instagram that stands out, and this is kind of piggybacking on the fish whistle community that Dave talked about, is Token Jew. Token Jew. I've actually emailed them and say, I love your social media, because I'm on it all day long, and I can't tell you how boring my feed is because everybody posts the same thing. But doing stuff that's punchy, doing stuff that's a little outside the box, because we're supposed to be outside the box, and every brand should be outside the box from the brand next to it. If you check out the Token Jew, they have tons of videos. A lot of it is just tongue-in-cheek jokes, and the engagement they get is incredible. I always look at the actual shares, not the likes. Likes I look at, comments are super important, but the shares are way more important on Instagram to me as a social media manager. And they hit it out the ballpark with every single post. So it's video. Video is always going to be king, as Dave and Lori both know. But also kind of pushing the envelope. We're supposed to do that. We are emerging industries that are new to a lot of people. So it's okay to push a little bit. They don't get shut down, at least not that I've seen. I haven't seen them shut down yet. So maybe they know people at Meta. Who knows? But it's a great account. You have to follow it.
So, Amy, what I think you're talking about is true differentiators.
Yep.
is that you actually have to truly differentiate yourself. And so I know that Dave will understand this. When you do brand strategy and when you create your own brands and things like that, you have to have true differentiators. Otherwise, you will never stand out. And so it's important to understand what's out there and what people are doing, what people are looking at, and then how can you be a little bit different? And so in this conversation, it's really from a marketing perspective. But I also say when people create product brands and things like that, you actually need to have a product point of differentiation. It has to be a real point of differentiation, not just something that you throw out there because it sounds good.
You know, it's funny, Lori. I totally agree with you. And by the way, I'll also add it's got to be real or perceived, right? You know, because that's also part of it. But here's the one thing that just in this conversation we've spoken about. So if you think about here, we're talking about cannabis brands and how they speak to community and promote themselves. So Fish Whistle is, yes, it's cannabis, but it's cannabis and anglers and fly fishing. Right? Heavy grass is cannabis and heavy metal lovers, you know, rockers. Token Jew is cannabis and Jews and weed and friends of Jews and weed, right? So so it's interesting to see there's this double layer of communities coming together, which makes it not only just one community, cannabis, but even it's a double click on that, right? It's even going deeper into that where people are cannabis friendly or cannabis consumers or cannabis positive, but then they're within their community. And cannabis either does two things. It's either additive or subtractive. If it's additive, it enhances an experience. If it's subtractive, it takes away. So alleviates pain or puts you to sleep. And if you can get people to relate, like Lori's story earlier about, I would call that a subtractive use of cannabis, which is I'm using this to alleviate pain, and there's other people suffering from that pain, then they relate to that. Or if there's people that like to get high and go fly fishing, and that's their escape, there's a community that totally relates to that. So it's those special needs, and it's that double click, and it's getting below the first layer. I think that, you know, and it's really what makes a brand unique and speaks to a specific community. And once you know who that community is, then you can get into where should I talk to them, meaning in the real world or on which platform? How should I speak to them? What's my message and tone? How am I consistent across all those brand pillars, which makes sense? And where is it that I'm not too salesy and that I'm connecting and engaging? Amy, I thought you hit it right. You know, how many followers you have is these days, I guess, less important than the amount of engagement you have.
Yep.
So it's just all these things that sort of add up to create, you know, not only the brand, the promise, but how you then convey that and communicate.
So are the three of you saying that the brands are sort of moving away from direct product promotion and instead focusing more on this indirect lifestyle, value-driven content, authenticity? Is that what you're saying?
I would say no. That's for social media. Your email marketing and SMS and digital marketing can be more promotional. So I don't want to just talk about social media. But I did want to add something. It's that you have to know who your target audiences are before you even come up with a name. And David will be able to hopefully agree with this. You need to hire somebody who's going to go through this with you before you just throw a name on your brand, because we know the damage that can be done to your brand after the fact once you put yourself out there. But you have to do a deep dive. It's not everybody over 21 who smokes pot. So you have, and that's how you differentiate yourself, by actually showing that you know who you're marketing to. And that comes
how do you
from
do
deep
that?
dives.
But how do you do that?
You go on LinkedIn and find one.
Okay. All right.
Well, you have to develop your prime prospect.
Yep.
So your prime prospect is the shopper who's most difficult to delight. If you
But
capture
most people
them,
don't even know that phrase. Just so you know, I work with a lot of startups. They don't even know what that means, which can be frustrating for the end person like me.
Absolutely. So it's the person most difficult to delight. If you capture them, you capture everybody else. I call it the trendsetter.
Yes.
And so, you know, I used to deal with a lot of companies who would say, okay, well, I want to capture the millennials, but I don't want to forget about the baby boomers. And I was like, okay, so everybody here, tell me, when you want to know what the hottest new trend is, do you ask your parents? And absolutely nobody raises their hand. And I asked them again, okay, so when your parents want to know what the hot new trend is, who do they go to? And everybody goes, me. And so that means you're the trendsetter. If you capture that person, you get the rest of the rings. I'd like to think of it as a bullseye. So the bullseye is your prime prospect, but you have people in the outer rings. And so if you capture the prime prospect, you'll get the people in the outer rings. If you try to go for the outer rings, you'll miss the prime prospect. And I think, Amy, you mentioned brands that have gone wrong. And we've just seen that in traditional industries. We just saw a major brand walk away from their prime prospect, and nobody talked about that. They only talked about some of the political issues associated with it. They didn't talk about the fact that the brand forgot who their prime prospect was. And instead of just welcoming another group into the brand or adding to their rings, they flipped their prime prospect. And as a result, they alienated their original. And they'll probably never get that person back completely because they truly forgot about who they were. And that, at the end of the day, was their biggest mistake.
Who are you talking about? Is this a Tesla thing?
No, this is Bud Light.
Oh, yeah.
And so when you think about Bud Light, and not to get into political issues here, but their prime prospect was the bro. That is a guy between the ages of like 20 something and 40 something. Who watches sports and does kind of that, lives that bro lifestyle. That's the trendsetter for that. And instead they decided to trade that person in. That person's probably somewhere along the lines of like 30% of the population for a very small subsegment of the population, which was the trans community. And nothing wrong with targeting the trans community, but when you trade 30% for 0.5% and 0.5% that breaks down into even smaller groups, then you've really made a decision about who's going to be shopping and buying your brand. And I don't think they realized that when they did that, that was going to upend their results so badly. And as a result, they had to overcorrect in order to try to even get it back, and they still haven't gotten it back.
Well, I think Bud Light probably had a lot of demographic information, psychographic information about their buyer. They had a lot of data. I mean, where does that data come from in this industry to be able to tell who's buying the product? Because there are limitations. I mean, there's cookie limitations on visits. There's limitations on who comes into the store. I guess that's what loyalty programs are for. But how do you get that data so you could truly understand what your demographics looking like, and then how do you adjust accordingly to stay in the zone, in the rings, if you will, that buying your product?
So that's a great question. You have two forms of data that you can find. You have primary and you have secondary. So primary is primary consumer research, which are like surveys, focus groups, things like that, where you're actually talking to consumers and trying to understand how they feel about your brand or whether they're even aware of your brand. The second piece of that is going to be your secondary data. And when it comes to a brand like Bud Light, you can utilize platforms like Nielsen, Circana, Numerator. There's a ton of platforms out there in the consumer packaged goods space. When we talk about cannabis, it's a lot less. Yeah. We have, Headset, we have BDSA, we have other platforms, but they're not nearly what you see in consumer packaged goods because it's such a traditional, robust industry. But you look at both the primary and secondary and you correlate them together to make sure that you truly understand who your customer is.
And the truth is, in the cannabis space, as Lori just said, it is difficult. There is data, but again, and I guess this is true in the non-cannabis space too. Those that do the shopping aren't always the consumers. But I think more specifically in cannabis, And this is changing now as dispensaries are becoming just designed better, and people feel more comfortable about walking into them. But the truth is, because of the tax laws, dispensaries just look like porn shops, I'll call them. They look like places you don't want to walk into because they're not able to expense the look and feel and all the upgrade for a dispensary, whereas like a restaurant could. If a restaurant wanted to build out the interior and put $3 million of art on the wall, they could expense all of that. A cannabis dispensary can't. So therefore, cannabis dispensaries also tend to be, not only because of zoning in areas that people probably don't want to go, but also because of the cost involved in not being able to expense it, buildings that don't look great. So what does that do? That might cause, and again, forgive the stereotyping here, but that might cause, I don't know, a soccer mom to tell her husband to go pick up her product because she doesn't want to go to that neighborhood or go into that store, right? So again, there's just a lot of information that is incomplete in the cannabis space in terms of who's purchasing and who's consuming, because they're not always the same.
Yeah, and I guess the data coming out of point of sale systems are probably anonymized, and so it's not as easy to sort of get some of that information. But I guess that's what some of the companies you mentioned, Lori, are providing in the space. It's interesting because there's got to be some behavioral analytics and understanding. Otherwise, it's hard for marketers to do their jobs, right?
Well, it's very challenging in the cannabis space. I mean, we've seen data come a long way, but when I started in the space, I remember my first project was to reassort our dispensaries. And so my question was, how do consumers shop the category? And everybody looked at me like a deer in headlights. And I was like, okay, so do we have a market structure? So a market structure is all about correlations of consumer purchase data. Nobody knew what that was. Nobody knew what a decision tree was, which is more primary. And so I'm like, okay, where's the data? And they're like, well, we have data, but it's only for mature markets. And we don't actually operate in any of those markets. And because cannabis is different than consumer packaged goods, every state operates as a separate country, that what you learn about in California has no application in Illinois. And so that data was not helpful to me. So we had to find creative ways to look at the data, look at our POS data. We set up product cards and tried to understand how consumers were, what they were gravitating to. But there's also platforms in the industry now. So like you talked about POS data. So Headset is sort of like the king of POS data. They hook into retailer POS systems. They bring that information into a platform. They put it onto dashboards so people can understand it. You can understand basket size. You can understand sales. They are able to anonymize it and put it in so that you can understand what's happening in the Illinois market versus the Michigan market. And then they have platforms where you can actually do demand planning and really understand how people are purchasing your product so you can make sure orders are placed in a timely way. But that's all very up and coming, very new, not quite where we see, other traditional industries, but we have made major strides in the past 6 years. So it's going to be important to really understand that information, and not just your own information. You have to understand the bigger picture as well. So when I hear companies talk about, well, I have access to my own POS data and I don't need to see what's going on in the rest of the market, what that tells me is you're making decisions in a vacuum. And so I worked with an operator in Colorado, and I was looking at their assortment, and I asked them, I'm like, why don't I see Wana on your assortment? And they're like, well, why would we need Wana? And I'm like, oh, it's only in the top 2 edible brands in the country and definitely within your state. And they were like, oh, we didn't even realize that.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, that's why you need to be looking at more of that insights data, like what is happening in the market. Because if all you know is what's in your dispensary, you're missing a ton of what's happening out there.
Right.
I mean, maybe not in a new medical market, but definitely in a rec market. New brands are coming in every day. You need to stay on top of that. You need to know what's happening. You need to know what categories are increasing or declining. You need to know what pricing looks like. Otherwise, you're going to completely miss the mark.
And it's interesting from not only within state, but from state to state. Brian, one thing we did when I first came into the market, I was hired by a company that had 3 bottling lines, and they really didn't know what to do with it. So they were curious, and I had just come from the beverage industry, and I didn't really have any cannabis data in terms of how was I going to run these 3 bottling lines, creating cannabis infused beverages. And I knew that they could run tea, they could run carbonated beverages, and they could run fruit juice. So I didn't have that data, but what I did know, and the facility is here in the Seattle area, what I did know was the demographics of all of the various areas within Seattle and what dispensaries were in those areas, and made assumptions based on the people that lived in those areas and how much I could sell to them or what type I could sell to them. So was it, for example, and again, forgive the stereotypes here, was it South Seattle where it just seemed obvious based on the demographics that we should go in with a sweeter, maybe a grape or an orange beverage? Why? Because I know from previous experience that in lower socioeconomic communities, they drink sweeter beverages. So do we come in with an orange or a grape into this community with a higher dosed, which is what we were also seeing, a higher dose THC product? So we were able to actually successfully create 2 beverages that went into the South Seattle area, which became best sellers based on their flavor profile and their THC level. Conversely, or similarly, but in a totally different way, I saw, and it became pretty apparent that in Washington State, the east side of the state and the west side of the state are very different. The east side of the state is very right-leaning and has a high amount of veterans. The west side of the state, Seattle, is very left-leaning. So what I realized very quickly was if there were lots of veterans in the east side of the state, I thought there might be an opportunity to offer a cannabis beverage that was specifically designed for veterans suffering from PTSD. And what I did was I drove over to Spokane, Washington, and I went to the VFW, and I set up a number of focus groups, and I met with a number of veterans who all said they did not want to, they really weren't fans of cannabis. They certainly didn't want to smoke it. They didn't want to smell like it. But if it could help them in one way, shape, or form with their PTSD, they were interested. So I went back. We created a number of different formulations in terms of dosing and different flavor profiles. We came back. We did a number of tests. And what we ended up with was Blaze American Cola. The tagline is "The Cola Patriots Prefer." The color palette was red, white, and blue, which was a low-dosed carbonated cola. In no time at all, we launched it in the eastern part of the state, and in no time at all, it became the best-selling beverage in eastern Washington. Why? Because all the veterans were talking about it. Again, online, offline, in the real world, we targeted a community. We knew they had a need, and we basically served it up to them. And we asked for their input as we developed it as well. So when it came later to talking to them about the product, we didn't even have to do that because we leveraged their insights and we respected their knowledge and their desires and their wants and needs in the development of the product. So now the product sells itself to that community. And
so you had to ask a lot of questions to figure out this information, to be able to get that data, which I guess is what marketing is really all about, is getting the people what they want and where they're going to meet. But it really, to me, it like begs the questions. One thing I've noticed about this industry in particular, that it seems to me, and you guys may say I'm nuts, that the cannabis consumers are loyal to their values, not just to their brands. So even the most sort of engaged customers will switch to competitors if they perceive that a brand's mission as inauthentic or misaligned with their with their beliefs. Do you see that? Do you find that in what you're seeing?
I would say a good one that stands out to me as you were talking, Brian, was just Buy Weed from Women. Was started a few years ago to try and showcase the female growers who were out there, the female wholesalers, the female retail owners. That made a lot of women decide to purchase from their brands. And to that, it's about how you roll that out and how you introduce that concept, which is funny to say it's a concept, but to other people. And I wish I could see the stats on that, but I'm sure that the female population went up, and a lot of men want to support women owned businesses in this industry because, you know, we're always looking for a cause or something to stand behind. But that's one that stands out to me with regards to that.
So I'm not even sure that consumers really understand cannabis brands. And the truth is, because, you know, like I used to work for Ragu pasta sauce. We produced it in Owensboro, Kentucky. We shipped it all over the country. It didn't matter where you were, it was the same product, and it was available everywhere. With cannabis, everything is moving sort of state by state very slowly. And so we don't really see the same lifestyle brands we see in other industries. We don't see that brand equity that we've seen, you know, in food and beverage or in apparel or any of those traditional spaces, because consumers really are, even the most engaged ones, only know what's kind of right in front of them. And I always talk about how when you go to a dispensary, it's not a shoppable experience, especially here in Illinois. I know it's a little bit different in Washington State, but in a normal shopping experience, like if you go to the grocery store, you're able to walk the aisles, you're able to look at product, pick it up, touch it, smell it, sometimes taste it. In cannabis, it's one of those situations where it's, at least in my state, it's all behind the wall. And even in Washington, where it's on the floor, it's still behind stuff. So it's not really shoppable. You can't just pick it up. And so cannabis is an industry where consumers really don't make their own decisions, because the decisions are really made by that bud tender in front of you. And so even the most savvy consumers only know what's in front of them. They're always going to be asking for what's new. And I don't think you see the same brand equity, same brand loyalty that you see in other industries, because we're just not there yet. Will we be there in a few years? Maybe. But as of this point, we're not there yet.
You know, and it's funny. I mean, to a large extent, you know, it begs the question, like, you know, who should brands be speaking to? And the answer is both here, right? You know, who should they be speaking to? The buyers, the bud tenders, and then there's the consumers, right? So there's a push and a pull. But I think right now, you know, dare I even say, the more important educating that needs to take place right now are the buyers and bud tenders more than the consumers. Because the consumers, if you're a core consumer, you know what you want, you're going to come in and just ask for it. But most people aren't core consumers. There's more kind of curious people than there are core cannabis consumers out there. So if they come in and they're looking just across a slew of brands, either they're attracted, so you can't open the package, you can't smell it, like Lori just said. So it comes down to packaging first, what's attractive, and then probably price, you know, and then maybe if they're interested or deep enough, maybe THC level, you know, and then it really comes down to what the bud tender says about it. Oh no, you shouldn't take this one. This one's a better one. You know, it's always that. It's always a give and take. And even 14 years in the industry, when I go in to make a purchase, I'll always buy my old favorite, something new, and something the bud tender recommends. So I think it's perhaps even more important to be thinking about what messaging we're saying to the bud tenders and the buyers, more so than the end user at this point.
Okay, so what I heard is that the consumers don't know what they don't know, right? And in many respects. So that sort of leads to my last question that I'd like to sort of discuss is what tools are out there? Like, for example, my son uses this Yuka app when he grocery shops because he's very focused on health and wellness. So he'll scan something in the shopping mart where it'll tell him what's in it, the good stuff, the bad stuff, and he'll avoid certain things, if it comes up on that app. Now, we're starting to see these apps come out that talk about the characteristics beyond THC, which is a big debate I saw on LinkedIn today. Is THC the real thing that everybody wants to talk about, or is it all these other characteristics? Well, if consumers don't know what they don't know, how do we get them to know anything? And are these tools important to be online and at the actual dispensaries where they can click, barcode, learn about all the different characteristics, terpenes, et cetera? Even though we know cannabis is personal, does it take the education beyond the bud tender, who, let's face it, is not always educated on terpenes and all the different cannabinoids and everything else? So how do you see those tools playing from an educational standpoint to get the consumer up to a point where they can understand at least preferences to then tie to brand?
So if I could just jump in here, and I'm going to simplify this in two ways. The first thing I'm going to say is, one, so cannabis is pretty scientific and pretty specific and pretty deep. That's the first thing. But the way we need to deliver this is basically a model that everybody understands. And so now, forgive me for the experts in the room, but I'm going to simplify this. There's a model that already exists. It's called aromatherapy. Oh, guess what? Indica, or more indica-leaning cannabis, has linalool in it. Oh, guess where else linalool exists? Chamomile and lavender, and those things that we know that relax us. Oh, and guess what? Sativa. It's amazing. It's got pinene, and it's got limonene, and it's got other things that are known to us and through aromatherapy to be uplifting and invigorating. So if we know that indica basically, and again, everything's a hybrid these days, I'll just say, but if it's indica leaning and we know it has linalool and other terpenes in it that are relaxing and that have been known to relax us in other plants, and then on the other side that, enhances us or uplifts us through citrus and pine, we know these things. We should be using models that people understand, because the truth is, like right now, even when I use the word strain, do you know the word strain has nothing to do with, it has everything to do with viruses and bacteria. It has nothing to do with plants or botanics at all. But at some point in the cannabis space, somebody decided to use the word strain instead of cultivar or chemovar or a few other words that we should be using. So now, as we move forward, basically, we have people in our industry talking to scientists about strains, and scientists looking at the people in our industry, scratching their heads saying, what the hell are these people talking about? So, so words are really important, but coming back to the model, is there a model that everybody understands? Yes, it's called aromatherapy. Let's start using it.
I like that. I would love to see more of that on social media, and not just an explanation of that terpene, but going into, like you just said, relating it to something that is relatable to people in everyday life. That's a great idea, Dave.
We're all consumers. We shop every day. We have these models in our head. Why aren't we applying them, as brand owners back to the consumers in the industries that we're already currently in? And that comes back to real world, online, consistency, building community. It's not rocket science. It's just that we're all looking for the next, in air quotes here, disruptive or hack or whatever it is that we're trying to do. Let's just focus on the basics.
But you just answered my question in the affirmative, that we do need better tools to be able to educate the consumer and give it something they can relate to. I think that's what you're saying. I mean, I remember when Shell gasoline came out with this, they basically said our gas has detergent in it, and they gave it a name. Well, every gas has detergent in it. They were just smart enough to give it a name, right? And they brought consumer awareness, and they had a major shift in their sales because, I'm going to go there because it has X21 detergent in it. Well, every gas has detergent in it. Again, they were just smart enough to do that. So I'm wondering if that's an angle around education and being able to, really promote it. And it sounds like it is. Lori, you've been quiet. Tell me what you're thinking.
Brian, in answer to your question, do we need tools? Do we need better tools? Yes, we do. But we're starting to see them come out. And so there's a platform out of California called Buddhist, and they have they're training like you would train a sommelier to really understand all of the nuances. This is probably more on the connoisseur side, but they're kind of creating the Zagats of cannabis and helping people kind of understand what's good, what's not good. And so again, it's very much in its early stages, but we are seeing moves in that direction. The other platforms I've seen that I think are really interesting are kind of those virtual bud tenders. And I think they're interesting for a couple of reasons. One is, as a consumer, if, about 40% or more of sales happen online. And so it's, you click and collect. So you purchase online, you pick up in store. And when you're looking online, a lot of times you have no idea really what you're looking at. But the virtual bud tender will kind of take you through that consumer path to purchase to help you get to the right product. And so, is it perfect? No, nothing in this industry is perfect, and nothing in general is perfect. But it's definitely a step in the right direction to help consumers kind of understand what questions do they really need to be thinking about, and what are the things that are important to them. And then from that consumer path to purchase, some of the things I've talked to these virtual bud tenders about is collect that data on the back end. Really understand who these people are and what they're buying, because that data that you're collecting there, that's real data that can be utilized to understand how consumers shop the category. How do you create that path to purchase? How do you create that market structure? I think that, we're starting to embark on some of these tools, and it's really exciting. It's just that we're still, again, in like the first or second inning.
I think this is awesome. This has been a masterclass on cannabis marketing. It's not an easy thing to do, but the three of you have expertise. And David, why don't you start out by telling folks how they can get in touch with you for your services, and then we'll ask Amy and Lori to do the same thing.
Sure. Yeah. I'm first and foremost, you can reach me at david@brandingbud.com. My website is brandingbud.com, and I'm always on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Amy.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn and LeafWire. We need to give LeafWire some love too, which is a professional networking site as well. A little smaller, but it's coming along. And my email is amy@gethybridsocial.com. But like Dave, I'm always on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And Lori.
Hi, everybody. You can reach me at lori@lkpimpact.com. And like Amy and David, I am also on LinkedIn all the time. Please connect with me, send me a note there, follow me. And I would love to hear from you about the content I'm putting out there.
I am so honored, and the Credible community is so honored to have all three of you back on one broadcast. So thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. It means a lot.
Always great to talk to you guys. Take care.